Very good.
That guy had a very cool face. It was like he had a cool face. It was really long. He had a great nose. I loved it. Every time he was on screen, I'm like, whoa, that guy looks so cool.
He did. I'm not laughing because I disagree with you. I fully agree with you. It's just cool is not usually an adjective that I use to describe faces.
No, he had a cool face, man. As someone who draws very exaggerated facial features, I would love to draw him.
He does look like some. That's whenever you do art that includes Mason, he should be your Mason.
Hello, Lillian. We're back. We have another adaptation to talk about. How's it going?
Piper, we're back. I watched an entire adaptation of Jane Eyre.
Yay! It's been so long, it feels.
Mm-hmm. The last one we did was the 50 radio adaptation, which barely counts.
Yeah, seriously.
And then we did like a rewatch, but it's been so long since we've watched like a true full adaptation.
Yeah, and I think this is a neat example of a movie or a TV show that actually adapted things and that didn't just simply be like, all right, text to screen. They made changes, and I'm excited to talk about that.
They made some choices, Piper.
But hey, if you are just tuning in and you're like, hey, someone told me to check out this podcast, I don't know anything about it. This is Airbuds. I'm Piper. That's Lillian.
Oh, hi.
Hi. And
what a choice of a first episode. Congratulations.
I know, right? So I did not actually, I don't know the year off the top of my head, but this
57.
57. Okay, so we watched the Italian 1957. What would you call this? A miniseries?
Miniseries, yeah.
Okay, cool. So this aired on Italian television and probably TVs in other countries as well. And we watched it on YouTube on someone who clearly recorded it on a VHS tape while it was on because it had like all of the squiggles and sometimes static things. So that was like a blast from the past because I know my family for sure had certain movies that we recorded off of television. And so it was cool to see that again.
Yeah, it was one of those like, oh, okay. Do you remember when this used to happen? Do you remember when it used to just like be static for a while and we all just waited for that to stop?
Right? There's so many things like that. That's so funny to think about with the patience that I think we used to have with technology. Because it makes me think of being a sophomore in college with my roommate Tasha, and we were illegally pirating films because we're poor college students, and that's what you do. And we were trying to watch like old black and white classic movies that we found on the internet, and we would just sit there for like 20 minutes waiting for it to buffer, and then be like, okay, let's go back to this movie now. And I guess we cared that much to keep trying, but...
Well, and here's the thing, Piper, that I feel like we should talk to our listeners about, because I think this is a great opportunity for PSA. You wouldn't steal a car.
I would.
You wouldn't steal a purse.
If it was as easy to access as a movie online, I would totally steal a car.
Well, and then the other thing, too, is like when you're stealing a car or you're stealing a purse, you're stealing that from a person. This time you're stealing it from a company.
Yeah.
It's different.
It's
a totally different thing.
They've got money. It's fine.
It's fine. We were in college. Things are free.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. Don't steal.
Don't steal, guys. Be sweet.
I did have a friend who fully has a criminal record now because she shoplifted some cheese in college.
Oh my God. Cheese. What a thing to get busted for.
I'll tell you who it is later, but I think you can guess who of my friends from college that you know would get busted for stealing cheese. Don't say their name.
I won't say their name. I'm so excited. That is an off-air conversation. But since it's been so long since we've done an actual adaptation, we're going back to the good old days of one of us needs to, as quickly as possible, recap what we just watched. Okay. It's going to be me. I'm going to be the one who's going to do it.
Which, thank God. Because everyone who knows our recaps knows that when I do them, somehow they end up longer than the adaptation.
Amazing. So whenever you're ready, Lillian.
I've got my timer up.
Okay, so in case you've never read, watched, or heard of Jane Eyre, basically a young lady goes out for a walk. A man on a horse and with a dog comes by, and the horse gets startled and falls over, and they have a very cute, flirty conversation. And then she walks away, goes back to her place where she's working, and finds out later, once she gets back to the house, that the guy that she met on the road is actually her employer. And they have this whole interaction. She's the governess there. She's taking care of his ward. But we also get like flashbacks to her childhood when when she lived in this house and her aunt and her cousins were mean. And also there's a guy there named Jack, and he's kind of like a love interest or just a best friend from childhood who's like really into Jane. So she gets sent away to Lowood, a school for girls, because her aunt hates her. She survives there long enough till she could get this job. We're back to the present. There's all kinds of stuff where she's flirty with this guy and he's got mood swings. And then she saves him from a fire. And there's because they live in an actual castle. There's a creepy lady and a creepy tower. And after the fire event happens, they have kind of this moment. And then he hosts a party, brings in this really hot babe, and this tries to make her jealous. There's lots of scenes in a garden. It looks like he's going to propose many different times, but I don't know because I don't speak the language. And then finally the proposal does happen. There's also actual gypsies, actual fortune tellers. There's this whole thing, and they're going to get married. But the Jack back home, he's worried about Jane, and so he goes to investigate things. He's been hearing stuff, and then he finds out about other things. I don't know. This is way too much information for the summary. So Rochester's married. The wedding is interrupted. He tries to explain things. It's very dramatic. She goes back to her aunt's house and hangs out there for a while. His wife, who's crazy, burns the house down. She goes back to him. He pretends not to be blind. She finds out that he is blind. She loves him anyway. It's a big happy reunion, and in the end, he gets his sight back at the end.
Yay!
That was so long. 150,
which, to be fair, would be so much shorter than how long I would take. I would take so long because this adaptation, like, first of all, some of you who may know the actual story of Jane Eyre but have never watched this particular adaptation might have gone, Jack what?
Yeah, Jack who? Jack why?
And you also might be like, this feels like you guys were maybe confused during the adaptation. I'm sorry, we didn't learn Italian for the podcast.
That's the other thing. So this is our first foreign film apart from Sing Deal, but this one we could not find subtitles for or a dub of any kind. So we just watched it in Italian, and since we know the story so well, we followed along as best we could, and now we're going to talk about a movie where we didn't understand most of the dialogue.
Well, and so I know I messaged you this when I started watching it. I had another tab open on my computer to Google Translate where you can play audio clips in and it will translate it to English. Did you do that at all or no?
No, I just listened.
I would have had no concept of what was happening in this movie if I had not done that. Because Jack's character is wild, and he's so like they basically. We're gonna talk about all of this in depth, but I was so confused and I could not handle being that confused. So I played lots of clips into Google Translate and got some wild responses from Google.
Yeah, you shared some of them with me, and I love the absurdity of some of it. So I wrote down here because so I picked up I think on the second episode that when the credits were rolling and it was listing the characters' names, because at first we have this character of Jack, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They just gave her like a kind of side kind of romantic interest thing.
Yeah, but then, my first thought was that I was like, oh, this character is Jack. That must be John Reed, but they just called him Jack because Italian.
Yeah. But then, as you see in the credits, his name is actually Jack Lloyd. And in Jane Eyre, Mr. Lloyd is the solicitor that comes in to kind of like interrupt wedding stuff and do all of that. So I thought that was a very interesting choice for them to be like, isn't that Mr. Lloyd? Isn't he the solicitor?
Mr. Lloyd is what's the name of apothecary, right? Who comes in at the beginning.
Okay. He's the doctor. Okay.
Yeah. So Dr. Lloyd is the guy who's playing chess with Aunt Reed all the time.
Gotcha. So this is his son.
Like the family friend. This is his son.
Okay. I see. Because I knew in some way that it was like a pre-existing character in the story. And I thought it was a very interesting choice for them to say, let's give Jane this connection, someone who's going to kind of be keeping an eye out for her and kind of helping her kind of be like, whoa, don't get into this trap. Like, I heard these things and I need to stop this and all of that stuff. Yeah. So that was very interesting.
I also found it interesting. I also think this leads into my like initial thoughts of the overall thing, which is like this adaptation really lived up to every Italian stereotype I have.
Oh no, what does that mean?
In a good way. Like, I liked it, but it sort of answered the question of like, what if Jane Eyre, but instead of keeping your feelings on the inside, they were on the outside.
There are many an outburst, many a big dramatic kind of moment.
And then also, like, what if Jane Eyre was just like straight up beautiful and like nobody was willing to deny that because she's so gorgeous? You'd be fully, literally pre-existing blindness to not see that. So obviously she had a friend-zoned like guy who had a crush on her when she was a child.
Yes. And I got the impression, because so much of what I'm going to say on this episode is just kind of what I was inferring, because I did not have my Google Translate up, but it definitely seemed as if, when we have the initial scenes of their childhood, which I love that it's just the full grown actors.
They're just like, all adults.
They're just adults.
Acting like children, but not even like, not like they do in the National Theater where they're like kind of dramatic irony, like you're pretending they're children. No, they're just like, no, this is how we looked as children.
It was great. But it definitely seemed also implied, yes, because right off the top, it's obvious that Jane is stunning. It's obvious that Jack has a big crush on her. And it's also obvious that her female cousin, maybe Georgiana, I'm not sure which one, seems insanely jealous of Jane. So
yeah, Georgiana is the one who like gets married later and like goes off and it has her own thing. And then it's like a big deal when she comes home.
Yeah.
And then Eliza's the one who's like fully also in love with Jack. There are so many love triangles in this. The love triangles are out of control because there's the standard, like not really a love triangle, but kind of a love triangle of Jane and Bertha and Rochester. And then there's the love triangle of Rochester and Jane and Jack. And then there's the love triangle of Jack and Jane and Eliza. And I'm sure there's more that we just didn't know about because we don't speak Italian.
Yeah. So they just really wanted to put in all of the people are in love with other people and no one reciprocates the feelings except for two. So
yeah. And they're all very loud about it and everybody knows about everybody else's feelings in a big dramatic way.
Before we go into breaking down this wonderful adaptation in further depth, I wanted to actually take a minute and share some fun facts about Italian cinema.
Yay!
Yeah, because I just wanted to like lay some groundwork just so we have some more context about, I don't know, sort of the movies that came before this, kind of what this country's background is with making movies and cinema, because Italian cinema is actually insanely influential within the global scale of the history of this art form. Italian filmmakers from the start were doing some amazing trailblazing. They introduced multiple film movements, which took off and then inspired future acts in cinema. Not most famously, but the initial one that they did was their avant-garde cinema of Italian futurism. So that's where you would see things like the famous movie Metropolis. It's, all of this using big sets and really cool backdrops and matte paintings to convey this insane sense of magnetism when they were still like in the 1910s and just had like kind of that sort of a budget. But the effects that they created were amazing. So obviously we get into lots of stuff happens, but when World War II comes around, Mussolini, like many dictators, was obsessed with Westerns and cowboy films. And he liked them so much that he actually had this studio built in Italy, which I don't know about now, but at the time it was the largest film studio in Europe. And most of the movies made there when he was in control were obviously propaganda films. But after the war and he was booted out, they had this giant studio and they had all these resources. And so they're like, well, we're not going to let this go to waste. We're going to launch a massive a new cinema movement in Italy.
Nice.
And so what kind of came next was Italian neorealism, which is something that any film history is going to talk about. This was kind of a staple of post-war cinema. It was considered the golden age of Italian film, and where previously everything was like people like in fancy costumes and all these sets, now they were focusing on real life people. In fact, they often would just go and film on the streets. They would grab somebody and be like, be in our movie. And they're like, okay. So it focused on, highlighting poverty, the injustice and oppression that their people had just experienced. And it was a great way to kind of say, fuck you, we're free now, and we're going to talk about how everything sucks. So that also inspired a lot of stuff. The other big famous thing that people are probably really familiar with is the rise of spaghetti westerns, which were really popular in the 50s and 60s. This was essentially Like they would do westerns in the countryside of Italy, because again, that genre still was the best. And one of the most famous things to come out of that was by Sergio Leone. He did the Dollar trilogy with Clint Eastwood, and it's often considered that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is one of the most iconic and famous westerns of all time. And that was a spaghetti western. And last thing that I'll say about that before we get back to it that I think is so funny and cool is that like they brought Clint Eastwood out there, and like some of the actors could speak English, but some of them couldn't. So the entire movie is actually dubbed because some of the actors are saying their lines in Italian and he's just talking back to them in English. So he's just saying his lines. And then later they went in with English speakers and they would dub their lines over in English.
Oh
my
God, that's incredible.
Crazy. Italy is very involved in film and they have made amazing things happen. So it's important to note that.
Yeah, my grandpa loves spaghetti westerns. He watches them all the time. Like he still like has a bunch on DVD, and like
Cute.
My grandma's less excited about them, so he watches them like off in his office. It's very cute.
Aw, very fun. Yay.
That's all super cool. And I honestly didn't know how much Italy was involved in filmmaking. So that's brand new fun facts to me. One fact that I did have is the very first movie adaptation ever of Jane Eyre, which sometimes you will Google this and it will be wrong. But the only source I truly trust, Charlene, is the one who has explicitly said this, which is there was an Italian silent film in 1909, and the very first one was Jane Eyre.
Awesome. Very
so that
cool.
was the first ever Jane Eyre was Italian in a movie, not the obviously, but
right. Yes.
Almost all of the silent films are unfindable now, or we would be watching that for sure.
So, Lillian,
yes.
Do you want to maybe lead us through like some of your thoughts, notes, critique, analysis of this version?
I think I do want to talk a little bit. We talked about this a scotch, but I think the biggest difference in this is the character of Jack, because it fully changes the story, because it makes it a little bit of the like why Jane gets sent off and like her and Jack are like kind of flirty. So the way I figured out the first time I like pulled up Google Translate and was like, I have to know what's going on here, was when the character that I thought was just John Reid fully got on his knees and held up a dinner plate.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, I also at first thought it was her cousin, but he was being too sweet. So I was like, no. And then I could tell they were saying the name Jack. So I was like, okay, this is just, they gave Jane a childhood sweetheart. That's what they did.
So I just like immediately assumed it was just they renamed John Jack for no reason whatsoever, because like Jack and John are both short names for Jonathan. So I was like, that tracks for me. And it wasn't that even a little bit at all. But like the way that they played him into this was like, he confesses his love to her. She says like, she's friends. If you want to see an example of what men think the friend zone is, this is that. She's just like, we're such good friends. And he's like, I love you. And she goes, I love you too, as my best friend. And then another thing that I noticed that was really different, because Jane is so beautiful and everybody's in love with her, I don't think that Helen and Jane's romantic relationship was even a little bit romantic in the book. These two were in love.
Oh, yes. No, totally. I was thinking the same thing. And that's one thing that I kind of love reading in when we do get a version that focuses a lot on Helen, is I'm like, no, like I could totally see these two having a crush on one another. And I think that's very sweet. So yeah, I got those vibes too.
Yeah. And I think because I can't remember where I heard this, but like somebody was saying like these two like have a kind of romantic-y relationship. And I'm like, I don't know that I read that into the book. I don't know that was an intention of the book. It's for sure the intention in this Italian TV show.
Yes, especially at least with, I mean, everyone in this is like touchy and dramatic, but there are so many moments, where they're holding each other and stroking one another's hair and comforting each other. And it's very, it seems very passionate.
Well, and genuinely, like, I'm curious as to what your thoughts were on the, like, because I can't tell if it's just me fulfilling Italian stereotypes or if it was the time in movies where they were all just kind of dramatically throwing themselves onto each other at all times, constantly throughout this movie.
See, I read that more as kind of like the drama of the time period, because this definitely comes across to me sort of like a soap opera.
Yeah.
It gave me those kind of vibes. And so I didn't necessarily think, oh, they're acting this way because it's Italian. I felt more so kind of like, oh, I think it's just like this is like the dramatic style that's like kind of popular. So that's kind of what I read into it.
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think it's definitely influenced in that way, but it's one of those like chicken or egg situations. Like, is the style of that time, because of all the things you said about Italian cinema that was influenced, like in the same way that like, do we do certain things in TV shows and movies because it's something that I expect as an American, or is it something that you would normally do? So we're now playing in Lillian's preconceived notions of these countries. I think of British like culture as being like pretty wound tight, and emotions are for the inside, and then you just keep them there, and then eventually you'll die. And I think of Italian as not that.
Yeah. You know, we'd have to have some of our Italian listeners to chime in and be like, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
Are we being silly?
If our
Tell
Italian and British listeners could just send us little emails and be like, yes, you are 100% right, Lillian. And also here is some of our most famous bread-related dishes, like some scones and pasta and pizza.
Lillian, I feel like you're starting to dig a hole. You
I
might
might
stop.
be hungry. There's a chance that I'm hungry right now. And so we talked about these countries, and now I'm like, God, a scone would be great. Oh, and some pasta?
Oh my gosh. Goodness.
This is a tangent. Get me out of here. Say something about the TV show.
I'm going to get you out of here. Okay, so Thornfield is literally a castle.
Oh my God,
that's one
totally.
of my notes. Like, I loved in fact, that was one thing I wondered too, is like, is that what Italians think of like great houses in England? Like, do they just make them look like castles? So that was something that stood out to me. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact instance in which this was made clear to me, but I have a note here that says, finally, a version that addresses how potentially dangerous it is to have Adele in the same house as a madwoman. Because I feel like there were definitely scenes where, so first of all, this Rochester, he's very sweet to Adele, which made me very happy. That's always like bonus points for me. But there were so many kind of moments of like family togetherness, not just between Rochester, Jane, and Adele, but the entire household. Like, this is a version where I feel like typically we see Mrs. Fairfax and occasionally another maid. This is a version where it's very common that many of the staff are just in the same room at the same time, watching a lot of this stuff happen, reacting, like comforting one another. And it was so cool to see, like, Rochester didn't seem as if he was like 10 steps higher than everyone else. Like, he talked really honestly to Mrs. Fairfax and to, is it Thomas? Yeah. The butler. So I like that closeness, but from that, there were many moments, it seemed, where like if things got dangerous, people were like, let's get Adele out of here. Like, we need to take care of this child and all this other stuff. So that stood out to me, and I liked that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think Leia, they kept calling her Leia.
I think it's Leah, just
and
with
I think
that
it's
accent.
Leah, but with the accent, which I did find myself throughout watching this keep saying Jane Eyre, Jane Eyre.
It was very cute. I liked it.
I also learned that I
Fairfax.
fully speak Italian because I kept picking up little words like bambino.
Yeah, matrimony
and prego.
Prego.
Prego. Grazie.
So good.
See, I speak Italian. I'm fluent.
We know the little words.
Signora. See?
Yeah.
But I totally agree. I think it was like, that was another big note that I had was like, and they established that immediately. Like, when Jane walks in, she's immediately greeted by like 5 women coming back from the walk she had where she met a man on a horse. And then like 3 men go out and get Rochester and bring him back. Like, it's like a big household and they all hang out and talk all the time. I fully loved him meeting her on the horse. My favorite like non-canonical choice that they made was the horse just leaves.
Yeah, it runs off. It's like, I'm free. Bye, motherfuckers. It's gone.
There's so many long shots of this horse having the best time in a field.
Yeah.
And I really feel like, just based off of the way my headcanon of what happened was the horse left and they had to do something about that. So they just filmed it with the horse gone.
Like the horse just didn't want to do what it was supposed to do that day. So it just
Oh my
left.
God, Lillian. I definitely did not see it that way, but that is fun for you.
I know. Thank you. It is fun for me. That's mostly what we're going for in this.
See, I kind of touched on this in my summary. What I loved about that opening, which, by the way, I think especially if it's going to be something like this, it's like 6 hours long. I am totally supportive of when they decide to tell the story slightly out of order, because they're like, we don't want to, like, we're never going to hook people if we just start with sad childhood and we expect them to stay for 6 hours. So we have to begin with like a flirty thing or a suspenseful thing. And so our opening is their meeting on the road. And I loved, it was very flirty. I liked that he was not like an angry Rochester. He seemed like, you know, kind of more the chill route. But I loved so much when she's like turning to go, he like asks her name and she like stops, looks over her shoulder and goes, Jane Eyre. And then like smiles and walks away. And I was like, damn, girl.
I know. You're like, okay. The heat is here and you guys have it and you're both using it. And I'm very happy for you.
It was very fun.
Speaking of this being 1,000,000 hours long, I have in front of me the length of our top 5 longest adaptations. It's the miniseries, this one, and the web series. Where do you think this falls in terms of runtime?
I would say this is number 2 or 3.
It's number 2. It's the second longest. The only one that's longer is the web series.
Yeah.
The web series is 491 minutes. This was 314. The next closest is the 73, which was 275.
That's so funny to hear that, because I feel like in my memory, it's felt like the web series was a bazillion years long, because like they were just like 100 episodes and they were like 1 to 2 minutes sometimes. But like I remember pulling up the playlist and I'm like, I haven't even made a dent yet. And I'm like, I gotta keep watching this.
That's our fault for both like months in advance. I was like, we're going to watch this and then we're going to interview Jane. And so we have to watch it by the time we say we're going to watch it. So like we should get started early. And we both were like, absolutely. And then the week before we were both like, I have watched 1 single episode.
I know. Oh, I had to. Oh, that was a lot.
But yeah, so that was 8 hours where this one was 5 hours.
So one thing I will say that is a very interesting experience that I haven't had very often is watching something, especially of this length, in a language that I don't understand and trying to simply interpret based solely off of the performances, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, first of all, just a cool exercise. I think if anyone is, you know, big into movies and stuff like that, just give it a try. I think it's good to pick a film or story that you're familiar with, like we are with this one, because then you can kind of like piece in, be like, I think this is the scene we're in right now. But because it was so long, a lot of the like key moments that happen in the novel, they gave full screen time to those conversations. And I couldn't pick up on the exact words because I wasn't translating, but it was interesting to just kind of watch the actors sort of go through these kind of emotional beats that I could pick up on. So I thought that was very interesting and kind of fun.
Yeah. And that's how I watched the scenes that I knew as well. I just like don't have the patience to watch something that I'm like not following. I get like really frustrated with myself. I'm like, why don't you speak Italian? And it's like, that's not reasonable, you dumb dummy. So that's why like I used it for like, what is happening here? Because I do not understand what is happening here. But for the moments where I was like, this is the stay speech I'm going to watch, like I could give the stay speech. I may as well see what it looks like in Italian. Those ones I watched. And like same thing with the proposal, and like it's familiar enough beats. I totally agree. I think if there's something that you know the story as what, like maybe it's Jane Eyre, maybe it's something else, finding something that's not in English and watching it. I actually was talking to Patrick about that this week because he's like, I want to learn another language, but I hate the apps and just repeating the same baby words over and over again. And I'm like, watch a bunch of adaptation of Jane Eyre and then watch it in Italian and you'll feel like you speak Italian.
Oh my gosh. Great advice, Lillian.
And I do. Jane Eyre. See?
Yeah. Wow. An accent.
It's Italian. It's Jane Eyre in Italian. It's totally different.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Thank you.
Lillian, can we please give a big hell yes to the fact that Jane put out the fire by herself?
Yes. Oh my
Thank
God.
God.
This is our first one.
Yeah.
Genuinely, we keep looking for that. And she did it.
She did it. He did nothing. He laid in bed while she took care of everything. And then he
his
got up.
actual bed was on fire, not his canopy, the bed, the like the what is it, comforter, blankets, whatever. They were on fire and this man was out cold.
Dude, I loved that. So that was wonderful to see.
So here's a question that I have about that scene. So in that scene, they have what I think is like an incense burner.
Mm-hmm.
And Bertha lights that on fire. So I think the intention was to create a lot of smoke, which makes sense as to why he like was passed out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, incense makes sense. I was trying to think about what that thing was too. It almost seemed sort of like a contraption used for like just heating the room in general. But yeah, I'm not sure. So
yeah, I think
we'd have to do some research on what that
where
thing
my
was.
brain goes, partly because incense feels very Catholic to me, and this was, if Jane Eyre was Catholic, also in case anybody was wondering about that, they slipped a lot of very Catholic references into this movie where Britain at the time, very famously not Catholic.
I think in that bedroom moment, we get the first kind of glimpses of a lot of their kind of, I don't know, what's the word I want to use here? Like passionate intimacy that they have. Like, did he kiss her in that scene? Am I remembering that right?
But it felt like they had sex. Like, that's how this movie was a lot, or this TV show was a lot. Like, there were so many moments where I was like, these two are going to have sex right now. They're going to do it.
Yeah, no, they did not disappoint with how passionate he was towards her. And I was really happy for that. So that was great.
I do think he like touched her face.
Yes, I think you're right. Because I'm thinking of later when there's that. So part 3, when he's doing the I'm going to trick Jane by bringing in this lady and making her jealous and having a big party where I hire actual gypsy performers and dancers. There were so many moments that took place in the garden in that section. And he kisses her once in the garden there before, everything is a thing. Yeah. But because they kept having these moments and like they'd have long stretches of dialogue where they're just saying intimate things to each other, I'm like, wait, is this the proposal already? And then Blanche comes in and ruins it. I'm like, oh, it's not the proposal scene.
Yeah.
And then Blanche leaves and then Jane comes back and they have another like passionate moment. I'm like, wait, is this the proposal scene? And I'm like, oh, nope, not yet.
Well, and that's where I think in this that they know they're in love with each other. Like, I don't think it's like a secret. Like, I think after the gypsy scene, they know they're in love with each other. I'm pretty sure Google Translate thought they said love in that scene. So I really think it's just like they get like it would be a proposal, but they get interrupted by the fact that Jack shows up and she has to go home because Aunt Rita's dying. Like, that's how this felt.
There are so many things I want to talk about how this decision to have this character of Jack, how it significantly changes the story of Jane Eyre. There's so many things about it where in original story, when she doesn't have the support network and someone who loves her, it's kind of what like is part of the contributing factor to why she falls so intensely for Rochester and is willing to forgive him because she doesn't have anything else and all of that stuff. And so to have this guy here, the stakes feel not as high. For like her aloneness or whatever. She's got this whole network.
Leaving is like not a big deal.
Right. It also, even though I credit these this adaptation for, taking the chance and making changes because I love seeing that. But it also, by Jack kind of, going out and looking after her and doing all of this stuff, it kind of takes some agency away from Jane.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I think Jane has not nearly as much agency. And I think that she's a less interesting character because of it. Like, I agree with you in that I think it's an interesting way to watch a new kind of show. Like, we've watched enough of these that this is a new, different version of that. But I agree. I think it's similar in some ways to a much lighter feeling I had about that to the 43, where in the 43 with Orson Welles and Jonah, I know her name is Jonah, but is it Fontaine?
Fontaine sounds right.
Two different Jonas who played Jane Eyre, and it's not my fault that I can't remember which one was which.
Also, I think it's just Joan, not fine. Jonah.
I can add syllables wherever I want. Joan Fontaine, I think, is the right name for that. And if it's the other Joan, I'm so sorry.
I think you're right.
She, in that one, they replace Miss Temple with Mr. Lloyd. Yeah. And they do all of these other things where it's like the men have the agency. And it's the side characters, and so it's like, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, and it's not. But that is crucial and critical as a cornerstone of Jane Eyre, is that the women, it's about these women running their lives. And Jane has agency in her own life. And by not having her safety net is there, it's Jack. He's never going to let her be homeless. He's never going to let her like be in trouble. Like, she's going to be okay. And if she needed to, she could marry him at any time and he would be thrilled about that. And like, and so it's Jane choosing like whether or not she wants to like go off and live in this castle with this one rich man, or go off and live in this other house with this other rich man. It's such a hard choice.
Oh no.
And she's just so pretty. And honestly, not as smart and interesting as Jane. Like,
agreed. This felt more to me like a Cinderella story than it did a Jane Eyre, especially once the proposal happens and all the like, there's that cute scene where she has lunch or dinner with Rochester and the maids are there and the maid curtsies to her and she's like, oh, don't do that. And she's like, no, but you're like a princess. I'm so happy for you. And it's like this little fairy tale ending. Like the prince chose the scullery maid and everyone's okay with it. No one's like, that's kind of weird that she's your employee, but whatever.
And she's
Everyone's
also
supportive.
Somewhere between the ages of 15 and 35, and we'll never really know. Because she looks exactly the same the whole time.
Amazing. One thing I want to say, because I just bypassed this note, but I love it, is that after Jack comes and takes Jane away, and then Rochester is sitting there all sad, the door opens, and out comes Blanche coming in for the scraps. She's like, I love you. And he's like, no, that's not what I want.
And the moment of the three, like, that's the dramatic, oh, I forgot about another love triangle. Blanche and Jane and Rochester.
Yes.
The moment of Jane, I have a screenshot of this, of Jane standing in the doorway while Blanche is like comforting Rochester, and Rochester's looking away, and Blanche looks at Jane and Jane looks at Blanche, and Jane ends up leaving instead of going back out to say goodbye to him again. And it's just like, da-da-da.
Yeah, so dramatic. She's like, yes, he's mine now.
It's just so funny.
So good.
The other character that I feel like adds a lot of just like wild humor to this is Grace Poole.
Oh yeah.
So many choices, so many moments.
She was as crazy as Bertha was, because we never see Bertha on screen.
We do, but we don't see her face. We see like her back and different stuff.
When she goes in to like rip the veil and everything like that, which, by the way, oh my God, this is one of my favorite things, is the scene where Grace Poole has fallen asleep and Bertha is taking the keys. So imagine, if you will, audience, a woman is like kind of leaning over a table asleep, and then an arm from the opposite side reaches over her, down her back, grabs some keys, and then comes back around again. And I'm just like, dude, why are you reaching? Go around. Like, what are you doing?
You need the arm on screen, but you can't have the person on screen, and so it's got to be creepy. But the moment before that, also, like, I fully was laughing because usually Grace Poole's drinking is like a very subtle, like, side note thing that we don't really see, and then we only get confirmation about it at the end when he's like, I don't know, people thought she got really drunk, and that's why the lady could get out all the time. And instead we watch Grace go up the stairwell that's on every 5 minutes. We see this stairwell. It's a spiral staircase going up, and she's fully like stumbling up, like climbing up like it's a ladder with a bottle of like some sort of alcohol. I don't know if it's supposed to be wine or gin or what, but she's like just downing it, like clearly finished the bottle, and then like stumbles into the room and passes out on the table.
Yes.
Incredible.
But like, they did so many shots of Grace where it's just close up on her eyes and she's crazily looking around, and I'm like, dude, you need to find a more stable lady to watch your crazy wife. Well, I think she's letting her out on purpose.
Absolutely, because she literally does later. Because like that's the thing. So like, we've had moments where Grace looks super crazy and suspicious, and then you find out that she's this caretaker. And in this, Grace looks crazy and suspicious, and then she actively tries to ruin Rochester's life because he hurt the lady that she's taking care of. So she lets Bertha out to light
Jane's room on fire. In what would normally be the veil ripping scene, we watch Grace Poole walk down the stairs with a candelabra and then open the curtain, and then we watch like from Bertha's point of view as like Grace nods at her, good job, good,
like, yeah.
go Bertha. And she only has 3 candles on her candelabra now, which means she gave Bertha a candle and sent her into Jane's room.
I love this. It's amazing.
Second favorite Grace moment. First favorite in terms of how they shot this. When the wedding is happening, we see Grace Poole walk down the stairs and then do the least Heidi sneak across the room as she's constantly like crouches down and does like a spin around dramatically and like hide behind a different banister where you can see her entire body and she's not hidden at all. And then she opens the door for Mason, and the look on her face, priceless.
So good. So good. It's amazing. So one thing that I would have loved to have translation for, and maybe you can remember from what your translate said, but there's a scene after the truth is revealed and Jane has left and Rochester has read this letter that she left for him, and he's kind of lamenting to the other servants. And then Grace Poole comes down the stairs and like seems to reprimand him, and she says like something Mrs. Rochester, assuming that she's talking about Bertha. And I would love to know what she said there. It sounded kind of like she was like ripping him a new one to be like, fuck you,
she was.
I'm glad I did this.
Basically, from the like, my Google Translate had some trouble picking up some of the lines at different points. It is not a foolproof way to watch this. Essentially what I got from it was she basically came down and went, yeah, I let Mason in and I let Bertha out and I did all of these things because you're an asshole and she's your fucking wife.
I love it. I love that she does that. And then he just kind of like, he's just sad and just takes it. He doesn't really like have any big outbursts to be like, shut up, woman, I pay you.
Like get kicked out or anything. So is she still there taking, so she's like, I drunkenly let your wife out on accident all the time. And then I did it very much on purpose to try to kill that bitch who was trying to take my lady's spot. Because she's your wife. Did you forget about your wife? I may as well spit in your face, you ass.
Amazing. So good.
Grace, it answers a lot of questions that I've had about things in the past on this. Because I'm like, why isn't Grace and Bertha more mad? Like, why aren't people mad on Bertha's behalf that he's doing this? Yeah. This is what would happen if it was.
Exactly. No, she picked a side and it's not his.
And I'm proud of, and I like, honestly, women supporting women. I'm on Grace and Bertha's side for sure.
Hell yeah. I have to say one choice that I really liked is that when the truth is revealed at the wedding, he simply talks about it. He doesn't embarrass Bertha by dragging everyone up there to see her. So I liked that choice. And maybe it's just because they didn't have a set for that room at the top of the stairs. But I'm like, well done, sir. You don't need to embarrass your mentally ill spouse. You can just tell them what happened. So I liked that choice. That was good.
Yeah. I also liked Mason, who I love shitting on all day long. He actually like stood up for himself. He didn't just kind of like stand there like a sad little puppy and be like, I'm so sorry. Instead, he went, you're mad at me right now? So this is what's happening and you think you still have the moral high ground?
Yeah. Nope.
Very good.
That guy had a very cool face. It was like he had a cool face. It was really long. He had a great nose. I loved it. Every time he was on screen, I'm like, whoa, that guy looks so cool.
He did. I'm not laughing because I disagree with you. I fully agree with you. That's just cool is not usually an adjective that I use to describe faces.
No, he had a cool face, man. As someone who draws very exaggerated facial features, I would love to draw him.
He does look like some. That's whenever you do art that includes Mason, he should be your Mason.
Okay, will do. I'm like, this is Italian Mason. Buongiorno.
I did really enjoy that they, first of all, when they talked about where they were from, they just said Cuba. They did not say West Indies, which I enjoyed.
Cuba.
They also, I had several points I was trying to figure out. So like in Sangdil, it takes place in India and it's a story in India. Like it's not pretending to be England. So I thought like a couple of times I thought I heard them say Italian cities because obviously like, so I like thought maybe it was in Italy. Nope, it's definitely in England.
Yeah, they reference Milcott a lot.
Mm-hmm. And they talk about, they say London, which I wouldn't have picked up on except for Google Translate was like, this word is London. And I'm like, that was a lot of very fast Italian. Italians speak very fast.
Sometimes they do. It's interesting also with the whole like emphasis that this show puts on Jack and the Reeds. We don't have the Rivers. We don't have a St. John. Jack is kind of a stand-in for that without being a pretentious churchy asshole.
Which side note on Jane going back to Gateshead is when Aunt Reed died. I did use Google Translate for that. And first of all, Aunt Reed dying was more emotional. Like everybody was sad she was dying.
Right. She actually accepts Jane's hug.
Yeah.
Like they have an embrace.
They have like, multiple hugs in that scene.
Yeah. When normally Jane's like, let me hug you, Aunt. And she's like, don't touch me, you rat. It's like, Jesus.
And one of the things she says to Jane is like, as part of asking for forgiveness, this is if you ever need a roof over your head, promise that you'll come back here and this will be your roof.
Aw, that's
which
nice.
is like very sweet.
Yeah.
And just sort of bizarre.
It's nice, but it definitely, like we said, it removes the teeth.
Yeah.
Like this is a very, like, Jane has a safe place to go, family and people who love her. So the fact that the guy she loved turned out to be married, it's, it sucks, but she's not homeless.
She has a rocking chair she can be sad in if she doesn't want to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy peasy. I didn't have much else to talk about within the going back to Gateshead thing. So I was going to kind of transition. Okay. So for the end, I think sticking on point with the kind of dramatic side of acting that we had here, they had Rochester in this great like blindfold kind of thing to protect his eyes. So when we see him, he has two hands, but he's got this black blindfold across his face with like, looks like gauze underneath. And I thought it was a fun detail that like, I think it's very true to his character that he would be very proud. And so when he knows that Jane has returned, he does this little thing where he takes out his bag of tobacco, his matches, and his pipe, and he places them on front of the table and he practices reaching for them before he takes off his blindfold to try and be like, I'm not blind. I know where things are. And I thought that was a great detail. So
I thought it was really indicative of the way they did this whole show, where it's like every time you're like, well, this is how Jane Eyre goes. They're like, okay, listen, Jane Eyre, we all know, we love it. It's not nearly dramatic enough. That's the biggest problem with Jane Eyre. Is there's not enough twists and turns. There's not enough drama.
Yeah.
And so they were like, what? So Jane and Rochester are going to get reunited. What's one more little twisty poo we can sneak in there? Rochester is going to try to pretend he's not blind.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And then it is revealed when he like knocks something over and he can't find his matches. And she's like, oh no, you can't see. And he's like, I'm a wretch.
And she's like, this time I love you even more.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked how they filmed his sight coming back. I thought that was a nice choice directionally, that it kind of cuts to his perspective. It's later, they're in the garden, presumably they've married, it's all cool now. The entire staff has gathered to watch his sight return.
Everyone out there. So it's very high stakes.
Yes, if he can't see, then it's going to be a big bummer.
Imagine that entire court, like what is it?
A courtyard?
Courtyard. I want to say courtroom. That's not an entire courtyard just full of people who we know do really dramatic outbursts at all times. And he takes off the blindfold and he goes, I can't see. They all just wail.
Oh my God. The sadness is palpable, but instead the joy is palpable because it switches to a first person and the camera is fuzzy at first and then it focuses on the brooch, which I think is also in the novel, right? He sees her brooch,
a diamond necklace, and he starts to notice her shinier when she wears shinier things. Yeah.
But then, I mean, if I lost my sight and the first thing I get to see when my sight returns is that lady's pretty face, that's awesome. So congrats for him.
I like that it's not Sam, your fiance.
I'm putting myself in Rochester's shoes. Like, I'd be like, oh my God, I can see. And also your beautiful face is right here. Huzzah. Everything is great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And then they have a very cute little pan out moment, which I enjoyed.
Yeah. Adele comes over, so family is important. Love
This
it.
Adele was very, very cute.
Yeah, she was great. In fact, she reminded me of my niece Ari because
Aww.
in this movie or in this TV show, Adele is gifted ballerina slippers. And for Christmas this year, Ari got like ballerina like point shoes. And she spent the entire day of Christmas walking around on her tiptoes in her ballerina shoes, just like Adele prancing around the party. So I was like, this is so cute. I love this.
That's so cute. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh my God. I forgot to talk about the most important character in this television program.
Pilot the dog.
Pilot is incredible in this.
He's so good. He has so much time on screen, and he's clearly also like a source of comfort to multiple characters. Like he's there with Rochester when he's sad. Jane hugs Pilot, and she says with her cute accent, she's like, Pilot. And she like gives him a hug, and I'm like, yay. Oh,
and he's in the
so
background all the time too. Like when she storms out of the ballroom because Rochester is ignoring her. First of all, he like didn't follow her. He like waited a bit and then follows her, but then she's already gone by the time he gets out there. And we just see Pilot sleeping on the stairs, and it's really cute.
Yeah, it's so nice.
But at one point when they're doing, so at several points during like dramatic moments, they'll like pan to a bunch of different people. So like during the fire scene, they show like everyone in bed sleeping. And during the like evil reveal at one point during the night, they go when, I think it's when Bertha is being let out by Grace Poole to rip Jane's veil. They're playing the dramatic villain music. They pan down from the fireplace to what's at the feet of the fireplace. And then Pilot looks like essentially at the camera. And I'm like, Pilot was the villain the whole time.
Oh, no, he did it.
It was Pilot. He's doing the crimes. He would never do a crime.
But if he did, we'd forgive him.
Pilot's allowed to burn whatever he wants. He's too cute.
Pardoned of all charges, except for being adorable.
Go out there and burn whatever you feel like it, Pilot. We love you.
The way that they did the burning of the mansion, I thought is one of the best that we've seen for a movie of this time period.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that they actually built like a miniature of the house and set that on fire because we had so many shots of like actual like building burning and falling apart. So I thought that was cool.
They also had a lot of candles just kind of hanging out that looked like very real candles to me, so that people kept like sitting down hard on chairs, and then all the candles would shake a little bit, and I'd be like, guys, don't actually light your set on fire for real.
If we're talking about, I don't know if this actually works as a segue at all, but I'm also just suddenly thinking about the costumes and everything, because like the ladies' dresses seemed somewhat, definitely not period accurate, but like they seemed a bit more closer to the time period. But the guys were all just wearing tuxes, just like 1950s tuxedos.
Sometimes they would wear like a big fluffy bow tie instead of just regular little bow tie, but that was it. Otherwise, they were wearing a tuxedo from the 1950s.
Exactly. So that was kind of funny. Also, the hairdos, like sort of the women's hairdos sort of did like the part, but they were so elaborately styled. Like there was a lot of vanity put into those looks.
They were all very beautiful, and I'm happy for them.
Same.
What
are your fun facts?
Oh, so here's my fun facts about the cast. So Rochester was played by a man, but his name is Italian. I know it's going to surprise you all. So it's Ralph Valloni.
Yeah, I would pronounce that Ralph. Valloni.
Ralph Valloni. So Ralph Valloni was in a couple of movies that people would recognize. One, so if you Google his like pictures of him, his face is very recognizable. About 10 years after this, he started being in more like Hollywood films or some British stuff. So he was in The Italian Job in 1969. Nice. Which is a movie that I know is considered a classic, and I've watched before, and I definitely recognized when I like Googled pictures of him in that movie, I recognized him. And then he was also in The Godfather 3. He was one of the main characters in that. So he has been in quite a few things, which I have found that when we have versions that are more accessible like this, at least one of the actors was in something, and that's why they put it on DVD, because they're like, this actor became famous later.
Nice. I also, just for fun, I want to like read off some of these actors' names because I did pull up the IMDb.
Perfect.
And Italian names are just so beautiful and cool. So we have Ralph Valloni, Ilaria Occini, Margareta Bagnini, Laura Carli, Matteo Spinola, Eda Soligo, Rosanna Montesi, and it goes on and on and on. Bruno Smith. They're just fun to say.
It did have a giant cast for a TV show and a miniseries in the 57.
Grace Poole is a woman named Maria Zanoli. Yes. It's just very Italian. I love it.
And a lot of them were in other Italian TV shows at the time. Like, I do think this is like a really good cast for Italian television at the time in particular. So
cool.
If these are actors that, again, first of all, if you're an Italian listener, hello. How are you?
Hi.
You doing good? I can't believe you're listening to this.
Please forgive us in our ignorance.
We do our best. We love you. But if these are actors that are like super famous in Italy, like some of the I know the Sangdill actors were really famous. So if there's anybody we should know more about, please tell us about that. Speaking of things that listeners told us about, I just one of our listeners from our post last week about kind of why Jane Eyre and all this other stuff referenced the fact that Queen Victoria had read Jane Eyre. And so I looked it up, and she like fully has multiple quotes and famously read it twice. She read it in 1858 and 1880. And she has diary entries talking about how much she loved it and thought it was interesting.
I swear I've mentioned that to you before, but because I know that you're a big fan of Victoria and her husband.
I have a lot of mixed feelings about Victoria as a person because of that whole colonization situation. Yeah, but I think she's really interesting, and I like the love story between her and her husband. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember coming across a fact. Yeah, I came across a fact that because she and him apparently would often just like read stories aloud to each other. And this is one of them that they read aloud to one another. So, yeah.
Yeah, she would like Jane Eyre in that specific way. I feel like as a person, I find Queen Victoria really interesting as a monarch and historical figure. Oops. You did a lot of crimes. Didn't you?
I just think it's so funny. So I've said before in this podcast that I don't care at all about the English monarchy, but I did watch the BBC Masterpiece Theatre. They had a show called Victoria about her, and I loved the first part because I'm a huge fan of Rufus Sewell, and they kind of hint at this like almost kind of romance between her and the what was he, like prime minister or something? I don't know. And I was all like, ooh, I like those guys, and you were like, ew, no, I like her and her actual husband. And so we both had something we were going for when we watched that.
Which, like, to be fair, that is one of those things that's alluded to a lot. It's like, did she fall in love with her first prime minister when she was 18 and he was 100,000 years old?
But if he's Rufus Sewell, I mean, can you blame her?
Well, and no wonder Jane Eyre really resonated with Queen Victoria. Am I right?
Yeah, seriously. She's like, I know all about falling in love with this older, mysterious guy.
And I also wish it had worked out for me. I'm just with my stinky cousin who, after he dies, I have his clothes laid out every single day for the rest of my life.
Ooh, that's weird.
She was sad. And the queen. If you're sad and the queen, you can do weird things.
Okay, cool. Yay.
All right. We did it.
It's time to rate this wonderful piece of Italian TV cinema.
Do you want to go first, Piper?
I will go first. I think I'm actually going to give mine a 7 out of 10.
Oh.
I was like, there were definitely parts where I just kind of like half watched because I couldn't really understand what was happening. And so if there wasn't a lot going on, I wasn't paying super close attention. But the scenes that I paid really close attention to, I really enjoyed. I love that they made big changes. I think that's something that many filmmakers, when adapting Jane Eyre, are afraid to do. So these guys weren't cowards. They're like, we're going to introduce this new guy and we're going to change things. And it was bold, and I applaud them for making that effort. So I'm giving this a 7 out of 10 pilot the dogs because this
I
one
was
had a good
gonna do
pilot.
pilots.
Hee.
But I'm not going to because we can't both do it. So I'll do.
We can,
but I don't wanna. I want to be original and unique, like this adaptation of Jane Eyre. I am gonna do another really good thing that happened in this a lot was there was frequently moments where people did a dramatic look off into the distance that the camera could catch and zoom in
yes.
on. So I'm gonna give this 6 out of 10 dramatic looks.
Very nice. I love it.
Which I think is also very, very similar to what I did for the 57 TV movie, the American one, which was not as good. But dramatic looks, I think, was also what I did for that.
Sweet. I love it.
Oh, also, we should do like a clickbaity situation of like Piper calls all Jane Eyre creators cowards.
Yep. Seriously, it's like you're all a bunch of cowards.
Except
You're not
for this
too
one
afraid to change
Italian
anything.
TV show, which did fine.
No, I would also say like the National Theater, they made some cool like interpretational changes.
I was going to say, this is totally unrelated, but our listeners who stuck around are still going to enjoy this. I was rewatching some of the National Theater for a video that I was making, and I realized that one of the things I didn't mention on that episode, but I wanted to mention to you, is we've talked a lot about how you picture things in your head. The way the National Theater stage is set up, where it's kind of like really, really pared down and you only have the piece, like you have the chair, you have this. That's kind of how I picture books in my head. I don't fill out the whole room. Cool. I just see like the characters interacting in that way.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. Yeah, I think the way I picture things when I'm reading books is similar to how I imagine my brain constructs scenes when I'm sleeping. Is I think it's piecing together things from stuff I've seen in either real life or in movies or shows. And so it's just like a hodgepodge of different drawing rooms from different period dramas and things like that.
Incredible. Well, next week we are going to need to cleanse our palates because it's been a lot of Jane Eyre. And this week in particular was a lot of Jane Eyre. I watched at least an hour every day of this week of Jane Eyre.
It's a lot.
It was a long boy, and I need something else. Piper, what else can I use to cleanse my palate?
Lillian, for this particular ailment, I would like to prescribe for you the movie Belle.
Yay!
Yes, which it's not the anime that just came out, which saw and that was like, it was fine. This is a period piece that was, what was it, 2014? 2013. Okay. I, for one, am very excited. Lily and I saw this together in theaters when it first came out.
I'm like, I thought we went to it together in theaters.
Yeah. So love this movie. Can't wait to talk about it and revisit it again. I've had it in my HBO queue for months. And ever since we mentioned the possibility of watching it, I'm like, oh, I have to wait.
A couple weeks ago, I asked Piper, I was like, do we want to for sure do Belle or do you want to do like a survey? And she goes, I'm going to watch Belle.
I'm like, I can't wait any longer. I love this movie and I need to watch it before HBO drops
I'm going to watch Belle and I'm going to talk about it on a podcast. And it's either going to be with you or with your dead body.
Can you imagine if we did a poll and people picked something else and I'm like, oh, I'm talking about Belle today, so I don't care.
We watched 2 different movies.
And just like battle out our reviews.
Incredible.
Love it.
Oh my God. But if people want to tell us that they think that Belle was the right choice or the wrong choice, where can they do that?
Well, you can find us online. The internet is a good place for starting arguments.
Oh, cool. So our Kmart parking lots, but yeah.
Exactly. Kmart parking lots. We have our regularly scheduled time slot there.
Which this week, we're both going to be there. And per usual, Piper will be supporting me emotionally as I fight people. However, if you want to fight about Belle, this is the first time Piper will fight someone in the Kmart parking lot.
Exactly. Yes, I will defend this movie until I die. But if you can't get there because bus schedules are weird, you can find us. We are at Airbuds on most social platforms. You can also send us an email, airbuds@gmail.com.
And if you think, wow, this was maybe the greatest podcast about a TV show that was in a language that I speak or don't speak, but the hosts don't speak, and you're like 5 stars for sure. That is a great thing to tell the rest of the internet about, because if you think this episode earned 5 stars, please tell some people about it. Do a quick little review. You can if you add a couple sentences, it actually makes a huge difference, particularly on Apple Podcasts. Otherwise, we appreciate any feedback, usually kind, but yeah.
Yeah, if you want to leave a remark, take your favorite song lyric, punch it into Google Translate, and then put the Italian version with your 5-star review.
And we will take that, put it back into Google Translate, and try to guess what song it is.
I love it. Oh, it's fabulous. Also, if you reach into your pocket and you pull out some crumpled money that you forgot that you had, or you get into your car and you find a few dollar bills underneath the seat and you're like, gross, what do I do with this? You can send it to us because we have a Patreon and we would love to take that icky money from you and give you beautiful prizes and treats and content in return.
Yeah, you probably have to drop it off at the bank and then get it to us, but that's the fastest way and the best way to do it. We have such cool stuff on there. Piper is working on an art piece that I'm really excited that you guys are going to get to see. There is a full video version, montagey version of our first book episode, and I'm working on the next one now, so that'll be out shortly. And we have some games and quizzes and trivia, and all of that is on our Patreon. If you, again, have that extra money that you're looking to just throw directly into our pockets.
We would love it. But even if you don't, thank you for joining us here. We love you guys so much. It's been very fun to talk about this, and we can't wait to see you next week. So maybe we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.